Hello everyone. First of all, I would like to thank all of you who took out their precious time to join us in this webinar. I, Aditi Badge, heartfully welcome you all. We all are here today with our speaker, Mr. Paritosh Nath, currently working as Business Finance Manager at Wibmo PayU. He has helped multiple growth stage companies raise venture fundings. He is Marvel movie buff and a cryptocurrency leader. He pursued his education at Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and Bachelor of Commerce (BCom) at University of Allahabad. He is CA and Master in Domains of Financial Planning and Analysis with 9+ years of experience as an emerging finance leader. He has worked as financial manager at Blipper, then joining in Reverie Language Technologies as finance controller. And today, he is with us to guide our young entrepreneurs on the basis of startup finance and a lot more. We are very pleased to have you, sir. Now, I would like to request the Director of RCOEM TBI Foundation, Professor Pravin Dwaramwar, sir, to take over. Sir, please.
Sure. Paritosh sir, I welcome you on behalf of Ramdev Baba Engineering College and RCOEM TBI Foundation, and I request you to take over and enlighten us.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. So I'll try to keep it short and easily accessible.
Yes.
We can schedule this as I'll take around less than half an hour in discussing some of the items, and then we can open the chat section to ask the questions.
Yes.
That should work, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what I wanted to discuss about was the funding part. If the students can switch on the cameras, that would be beautiful. Only if you are okay with it. I like to know who I'm talking to. So if you're okay with it, you can switch on. Otherwise, you can keep it off. Let's start with I want to cover two aspects today. The one is how to do a pitching and what are investors looking for when they make a decision to invest. Okay. So usually what founders do is they make a pitch deck, right? And then they send it to the investors. And when they discuss about this, they're talking about what is different with their startup. So when you create a deck, it has multiple parts, right? What is the problem statement? What is your solution? How big is the market and all? So you write a lot of text, you present it. What error founders do is they keep on reading from the deck, which does not make it a very relatable story. So as a founder, what should you do? I have my notes on the right side. So if I'm looking on the right side, it's basically I'm referring my notes. So basically the question is, how do you make an engaging pitch, right? So the answer there is you create a story. And what story do you want to tell? The story could be, why did you start your startup? How did you start your startup? How did you get your first customer? Right, that could be an interesting part. If it's been like 2-3 years and you are on a growth phase, what was your hockey stick moment when your growth started, right? So what are the basic aspects of a good story? There are 3 parts to a good story: a setup, a struggle, and a solution, right? So when you're talking to the founders, when you're talking to the investors, the idea is to make it relatable. Nobody funds a company if they cannot relate with a story. A good story is what you need. So let's see what are the 3 parts in a good story. So a good story has 3 parts basically. One is the setup, the other is the struggle, and the final is the solution, right? On the setup part, what do you want to do? On this, the setup is basically making your audience curious about what are you doing. Okay, bring the audience into the picture, make them feel like they are there. They are the ones facing the problems. The sentence is like, do you ever feel, or have you ever done something like this? And so these are what places the audience into the story. Now the audience starts feeling what you have felt. Correct. So once you have created the setup is the context. Once you have created the context, we move on to the struggle part. The struggle is make them feel the struggle. Make the struggle seem familiar. For example, if you are doing a pitch for Swiggy, right? The story could be like, okay, once when I returned from the after the college, I joined my first job. I had a hectic day. I returned from the office. It was raining and all. My cook did not come. What do I do? Like, so in these situations, the audience feels your pain. Basically, you have made them curious, and you want to make them feel the pain. On the struggle part, you also want to use specific questions. For example, if you're a B2B fintech startup, and you're trying to make the payment simpler for all the merchants. In that case, what do you need to do? You need to connect with the APIs of all the banks to secure a transaction, right? To complete a transaction. But as a B2B founder, it would be, you want to solve a merchant's problem, you want to solve a customer's problem, but to solve that, you first need to solve your own problem of connecting with all these banks, right? Which is in itself a time-taking thing. So you need to mention that as a founder, as a fintech founder, other fintech founders are also facing similar problems like this. This could be a pitch for your B2B startup. So once I've made the investors feel, right, then it becomes the time to close the story. You need to pitch a solution. Why is your solution important, right? Why the method that you are saying, why the product that you are selling is important for this problem statement. Introduce the solution as if, the statement that you can use is, what if there was a dash dash dash? So that is the problem. That is the statement where you introduce the solution. Does that make sense? 100
Yes,
people.
sir.
Anything on the chat? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sure. And what are investors looking for? How do you make sure that they fund your company, right? There are many startups working on the same space. You have to make it different, right? So there are 4 or 5 aspects why and when the investor will close a funding round. 3 out of these, I would assume 1 or 2 is not in your control. That depends on the fund. But let's see what the funds look for. Any guess? Okay, let me start. So the one part is the market size. Correct. We'll discuss all of these. The other is the traction of your product. The third is the team that you have. The fourth is basically whether the investors click with the founding team or not. And the fifth is at what stage the investment fund is in. Okay. So basically, let's start with the market size. If you're handling, if the solution that you have is for a small market, it does not make sense to raise $1 million, right? Investors have their own agenda and they want to make money, correct? Nobody will invest millions of dollars if you're not solving a bigger problem. If you want to limit your solution to a local area of your society or your city, it does not make sense, right? The whole definition of startup is you want to solve a bigger problem, you want to tackle a big problem with a big market size. Otherwise, you are just a small company. Correct. So market size is one of the important factors. One of the questions that arises here is, what if it's a very new market? What if your product is so new that a market is not there currently? You are a market maker. In that case, you need to explain that what you're doing has a big market in the future. right? You need to present the statistics from research showing that, okay, this is a product, this is a market just taking off, and it is bound to grow in 5 years, 7 years time. Right. For example, what happened with the cryptocurrency when Bitcoin first came, the market was small, but now the market has grown, right? With the new ICOs coming up and all of that. The second part is the team, and the team is for a seed round or a series A round. Team, I would believe, is more important than the product itself. So investors want to make sure that whatever the product is, their investment will make some money. And because the product is say so new, maybe it's just an MVP right now, or you have few paying customers, right? But it has not been tested in the market. So the product will succeed only if the team is good. The bigger question here is, the bigger question that they have is whether the team is complementary. If all three are engineers, whether their skills are complementary. If one person is an engineer, what are the other co-founders doing? Are they into marketing? Do they have operations expertise? Are they into sales? Can they sell a product effectively? Right. So you need to have complementary skills basically to make it easier for you and for the investors. If there are three engineers, it's going to be a problem. But unless you can prove that okay, all three have different skill sets, then maybe it will make sense. The third part is traction. Showing that your product is making money is important. Okay, so there's a whole lot of difference between creating a product and having a paying customer. Paying customer is what uh, proves that a product can make money in the future. So how did you get your first paying customer? You can also make it a part of the whole pitching story. So traction is important. Unless traction is important if you're going for Series A round. For seed round, what you basically need is an MVP to make sure that okay, the investor needs to see something. If it's a physical product, the product they can feel in their hands. You need to have a demo of that product. If it's a software or something, it needs to be an MVP. Basically, you need to show that okay, this is first version of your product, and you can make it into a bigger and better product. Okay, Vaibhav, I would rather not discuss specific seed funds. You can Google all of that, right? Otherwise, you can ping me afterwards. So after the traction, what is the next part is whether the investors gel with the founders, basically. See, getting funds from investors is like a marriage. You will need to talk to them almost more than 3-4 times a month. They will have a lot of questions. Once you raise the money, they will have a lot of questions. What are you doing? How are you doing? So there's a whole dynamic there where they play an important part, but you need to make sure that as a founder, you have an upper hand basically, but still you're listening to the founders because they have invaluable suggestions. They have been in the market for a long time, right? So these are the questions that an investors also think about. They also need to find you a fit. If your whole personality is like if you're going to argue every time, they would not like to invest, right? It's a people to people connection. You have to make that link. And how do you do that? It's basically dependent on your good personality. It also comes from, for example, if the investor and the founder come from the same college, same institute, same background, basically, that's a big plus point, right? That's why to make this connection, you need warm intros, basically. You reach out to other founders who have worked with that fund. You discuss with them, you ask them to make an intro for you. And so basically you come from third party, which has a common connection with you and the investors, right? That will what get you an entry, that will get you a foot into the whole pitching thing. So even if your product is good, sometimes the investors may not like you. Sometimes you may not like the investors, right? So that game will continue, and you will have to make a decision as a founder whether you want to go with that fund or not. Uh, the fifth part, and which is probably not in your control, is what stage the investment fund is in. Okay. So basically, what happens with the investors is that they raise funds which have a life cycle of 7 years to 12 years, anything in between, right? If you are a small stage company, if you are just raising a seed round, if you're a small stage company, you would obviously need 5 7 years to make it profitable, or maybe quicker, but the market size that they want to achieve, you will take some time, right? But if the fund is already is an eighth year or ninth year, it does not have the lifetime life cycle to operate and grow. So basically what happens is that the investors they Hey, sorry, I had a network issue. So that was on the investor fund cycle. Akshay, you can always convince investors from other backgrounds. So for an investor, business background is not a problem, right? They have a team basically working for them. They can always judge. They will have a team basically, and they are good people. They will have a background in the engineering, in the sales, in the marketing, on the product side, whichever industry you are looking for. So basically, if the fund invests in a fintech product, they will have the team member that can make an educated judgment about your product. But if you're pitching an agri product to a fund that does not invest in the uh, agri tech, they will basically not make an investment. It's as simple as that. You don't have to worry about whether you are making sense to that investor or not. So these two were the main topics that I wanted to cover. Uh, on the question sheet that I got, one of the good questions was, I'll just read it out so that you guys have an idea what I'm talking about. Why do capital expenditure increase assets while other outflows like paying salary, etc., do not create asset and instead instantly create an expense on the income statement and reduce equity via retained earnings? So basically, what I understand is, what is the difference between a capital asset and an operating expense? The capital expenses basically reduce a bigger cash. So the what problem the investor faces is, a capital expenditure is usually a bigger expense, which you can write off over the years with the depreciation and amortization and all of that. So even though you can charge an X percent, for example, one third of the whole expense on your P&L, it will burn a whole lot of cash for the startup, which one investors will not like, and which two, as a founder, you have to make sure that you have enough runway. So you should be very careful about doing a capital expenditure because it will burn cash for you. And raising funds is a big exercise. It will take you anywhere between 6 to 9 months at least to raise funds for the next cycle. So when you have 6 months of funds left, when you have 9 months of funds left, you start looking for the next round basically. That is one of the judgments that you have to make. On the operating side, the operating expenses will be easier for you to handle, and they will only take a smaller part of your cash. Hope that makes sense. Okay, that is what I was thinking of covering, and I have covered most of them. Uh, I would like the questions to come in if we can do that, or let me know how to proceed. The question should be okay, I think. Yes, can we allow the people to talk? I mean, basically, they can. Uh,
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. We will proceed with the questions. So, guys, if anyone have any questions, they can just drop their questions in chat box or just unmute your mic and ask the questions.
so unmute only if you have a question. Otherwise, you can remain mute. Okay, we have a question from Rohit. Is it necessary to have a private limited company to raise funds, or a partnership firm or LLP will also do? See, the whole idea, think from an investor's viewpoint, right? A partnership is kind of risky uh, exercise. When you are raising funds via a private limited company, it makes more sense because see, on a with a firm, the partners can always take out capital as well, which becomes a problem for the investors, right? With a company, you can incorporate it anywhere in the world. You can make it a holding company, a subsidiary company, whatever you like. You can raise funds from outside India. So a lot of these aspects are more regulated with a company, and that gives the investors confidence to invest large sum of money into you. Okay, it's basically more about making investors feel confident. For an for an MVP without a traction, I'm assuming you would look for a seed round. Seed round is anywhere lower than 2 million. Okay, seed rounds usually, because you don't have a traction, you just have a story, you have an MVP basically. Uh, Founders, it depends on how good a story you can tell. Okay, uh, if you already know the investors, if you have a relationship. Okay, just sidetracking here, one of the important points is do not talk to investors when you need fund. Okay, nobody likes friends like that, right? So you start talking to investors 6 months before with an MVP that you have, and you take them through your journey. So this will take 6 months time. You need to talk to them, you need to send them emails. Okay, take them out for a coffee and talk to them about your product, about the problem that you're trying to solve, and build a relationship basically. Once the investors get to know you, only then they will like to fund. Okay, so how much dilution you will have to face is also dependent on what kind of relationship you have with the investors. But on a seed round, you can look for up to 10% kind of dilution if you're raising for $2 million. You can do a you can break it pro rata wise depending on the funds that you're looking for. However, even if you're looking for a very small amount, investors would not like to have a very low shareholding. 2%, 3% is very small for them to make any meaningful revenue, even if you grow 5 times of what you are currently, right? So they also need some meaningful share to have so that they have the skin in the game. It's not only about money. Investors will also open doors for a lot of other aspects. For example, helping you connect with a larger company, uh, helping you reach a new market. So it's not only about the money with the investors, it's also about what other benefits they can bring in.
So we got this question related to tax exemption and benefits for new startups. Like how can startups avail the tax benefit and other stuff?
Okay, so that is not one of my areas. Plus, I have not been. I'm kind of out of that question for like 3-4 years now from the market. So I would like to not handle that question, and I would recommend you to Google that question. There are a lot of benefits that government has come up.
Okay.
I had Googled it some time back, and I came up with a long list basically. If you want, I can share that link with you, and you can circulate it with your team.
Cool, cool.
A dual career in science and commerce. That's a good question. Uh, See, a lot of investment banking, a lot of technical fintech products, or on the equity and share trading side. So a lot of products that come up in that space are made by engineers who have done an MBA in finance. So investment banking is a good area where you can look for a career. You can also, on the investment banking side itself, they create a lot of new products that can be sold. Right. For example, you would have heard of that the housing crisis, right, in the US in 2008. So the product that was created, that was one of this investment product that came up from one of the investment banks. It's not a simple mutual fund or a simple uh, FD or something. So these complex products that require a lot of algorithms to work with, so they need engineers with that. How do you manage the overhead expenses? That's a good question. That's a question that all the startups face. It basically depends on. It will basically come with the experience. That's what I can tell. See, once you have raised some funds, you will have, most probably you would have created a 3-year projections for your startup. You would have shown the investors what revenue you will achieve, and to achieve that, what kind of costs you will handle. So basically what you have to do is, whatever projections you have made to that investors, you have to stay within that limit and make sure that your startups earn that revenue that you have projected. Most of the times what happens is that the startups project a very rosy picture while raising the funds, and they fall sometimes 50% behind, sometimes only 10% behind. So that investors, so because the investors have been working in the market, they know all this that will happen, but you have to make sure that you are within that limit basically. If you are failing on the revenue part, you have to make sure that you achieve that revenue. You have to, within the next 6 months, or show that you are working towards that revenue basically. As long as you're hitting that revenue number, the cost can be taken care of. I hope that is what Mustafa meant by that. If you need any specific details, for example, what portion is the sales and marketing expenses and what portion is the payroll expenses, you would have to ask specific questions. One of the questions that I also get is how much funding, how much salary the founders can take, which is also quite dependent on the stage of the startup and the stage of the funding that you are in. Also depends on what kind of story that you have told to the investors. Right, but the usual criteria is if you have only raised a seed round, or if you are just on the Series A part, the founder salary needs to be lower than the market rate. Basically, the founder cannot be the highest paid employee of the startup. So you need to make money first. You need to break even first before taking in a big chunk. And usually investors are okay with whatever number you have. Okay, make sure that you cover your rent, you cover your basic living expenses, travel and all, and you take something on top of it, 5% or 10%, some number, and make a comfortable number for yourself. It's not going to be some lakhs, it's going to be in thousands if you are seed round only. And you need to make money for the investors before you taking money out of your startup.
So there's one question. The question is, what are your views on current scenario on future to start a business, and how investors will invest in financial crisis situation like this?
Uh, so maybe you would have seen an Insta post that's going around saying which all companies were launched in 2008's crisis, right? Airbnb, Uber, a lot of big names. So every crisis, see, it's basically depends on the mindset. There are few people who would think it's a crisis, nobody will pay for anything, let's not do. Right? Sit back, relax, and maybe after 1 year we'll look at it. The other mindset is this is a crisis, everybody is looking out. Okay, and it's a good time to make a product. Maybe you will face some difficulty while raising a product or while raising the funding round, but this is the time to make the jump. If everything is going good, if you're getting amazing placement offers, why would you want to do a startup, right? The problem is not many companies are hiring. Some companies are hiring, they will hire, they will keep on hiring. That's a different story. But every crisis presents a time where you can make the big leap, and this is the time for that. See, the problems with funding you will face always. It's not dependent on the crisis part. The investors are not shying away from investing. It's basically your mindset that will make a difference. There are tech companies that have raised funds in this scenario, right? There are fintech companies who are facing problems, but who have raised funds in this scenario.
Okay. So there are some like the people. There are some students who are not into the startups, but they want to learn like finances and other aspects. So there's one question related to the books. What can be the like your suggestion for the books for related to startups and finances part?
Okay, on the investment part, there's a book by Benjamin Graham, but I do not recommend that so much to the Indian audience. What I recommend is there are two books by Sandeep Mukherjee, who is an who is an investment manager at Marcellus. Marcellus is a portfolio management service. So he has written two very good books. One is Coffee Can Investing, and one is the other one from him. Sandeep Mukherjee is the author's name. These two books I would recommend to the Indian audience, basically. Okay, Vaibhav has another question. Which city has better investors for SaaS startups? See, most of the investors would not worry about which city you are in. You can look, see, it's a very obvious answer. Bangalore has the biggest, highest number of investors offices here. You can easily go and meet them. Not easily, but it's easy to arrange for a face-to-face meeting. Then comes Bombay and the NCR, right? You would want to be in these three cities. If you are in cities like Indore or Baroda or Jhansi, it's slightly difficult to get face-to-face time with the investors or arrange a physical meeting. But see, if you can get a warm intro even in tier 2 cities, the investors will be okay with a online meeting, right? It depends on how best you can pitch your startup. If you can make them curious about it, make them curious about how you would make them the money, they would be interested.
So there's one like funny question like what is the best thing about being a CA and what is the toughest and hard thing about being a CA?
So the best thing about being a CA is the name, the prefix itself brings some respect to you in the general social setting in India, right? It comes, very few professions have the privilege of mentioning uh, their profession before their name. CA is one of them, so that's one of the privileges that we have, uh, which goes with it. And the negative part is people automatically assume that you are uh, an expert in all things finance, right? So there are a lot of fields inside this finance world. For example, taxation, transfer pricing, accounting, consolidation, investor relations, right? New fundraising aspects. Everybody is not an expert in all the fields. That is what happens. But when you meet your relatives, what they ask is, help me file my return. So that is one of the negative aspects, I would say. It's like saying a software engineer about how to switch on or how to make your laptop work. It's crashed. How to make your laptop work.
So there are some questions chat box.
Can we convince an investor by elevator pitch? Of course you can. That is what elevator pitches are for. The whole idea of an elevator pitch is basically creating an intrigue, making them curious about your startup. They will not write a check just based on an elevator pitch. They'll call you for a coffee meeting, for a discussion, for a review of your product, for a demo of your product. Right? Elevator pitch is just to create a curiosity in the minds of the investors. And that is one of the easier parts, basically, I would say. When you are in a 1 hour meeting, investors will come up with a lot of questions that as a new founder, you may not have answers to at that point of time. But an elevator pitch is a shortened thing of that. It's just mostly it's maximum 3 minutes, and you don't have to answer any big questions, right? It's just to create a curiosity. Personal experiences related to seed fund. I just helped an agri-tech startup to raise a seed fund. They raised close to $2 million. This happened like 3-4 months back. So this was kind of an easier assignment that I had taken up. The founder had a very good older connection with the investors. He was a Wall Street trader. Basically, he was in US for like 9-10 years. He had made good money and he had just come to India to make a difference. So one of the things that happened was a lot of investors were very ready to invest in him if he could create a fintech product. So fintech is the hot product now, and a lot of investors said, you don't have to have a product right now, but just say that you will create a fintech product and I'll invest in you right now. So that is what happens if you have a very good background in tech or you have good connections, right? But we took some time. We looked at some other funds that we could approach, and we closed the seed round basically with an impact fund and with a fund that funds in the agri-tech space. So you need to have a short list of which funds will invest in your startup. You need to define the sectors basically. Okay, don't go looking for an impact fund if you're not going to do such kind of work. Don't go looking for funds that invest in only tech-based products, for example, SoftBank, and pitch them something on the agri-tech side. Okay.
So if anyone wants to open a startup during this pandemic, in which field he or she should look for?
Good question, Ayush. So my take is it will not at all depend upon the pandemic. Okay. A startup is something that will easily take, if you are going to run it, it will easily take 10-15 years of your life. Okay, so making a judgment about the next 15 years of your life based on 6 months of pandemic does not make sense at all, right? You need to have a startup where that startup makes sense to you. You need to put in time, you need to put in effort, you need to put in your sweat, right? And if something is not interesting to you, will you work on this for like next
No,
15 years?
no, sir.
People in India, people complete an engineering degree just because their parents wanted. 4 years is still, they say, okay, we'll do. But see, this is the point to make a choice, right? This is your choice. Do not let go of it on such uh, simple areas. Okay, choose an area that makes sense to you, which you are comfortable with, where you can build a strong team. Team is what will get you a funding in the initial phases.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ayush. Okay, I think we are done. Not getting any questions. Let me know, Yash.
There are some like people who are asking questions, but they have some connectivity issue as well, I guess. So they are forwarding the message to me.
Okay,
So
cool.
I will just read it once. There's one question in chat box.
Can a startup based on mobile app raise funds on ideation and good without any traction? So I'm assuming it's basically a mobile app that you are creating and it's not created yet and you want to raise funds. See, mobile app is kind of an easy thing to do now. There are a lot of products that allow a drag and drop facility to create a mobile app itself, right? Unless you are solving a big problem, what problem will your mobile app solve? That is the bigger question, right? Just building a mobile app. See, you need to have an MVP basically. This is something you are engineering students, you need to have this much control over the product. You need to have an MVP, you need to present a demo basically. Even if the whole MVP is not ready, you need to create a workflow basically showing that, okay, this is what the app will look like. If you click here, it will go there, it will do this, it will do that. This is the problem that the app is trying to solve. Okay. So you need to create some kind of connection with that investor, something that it's not only about going and making fluff about your product. It's about showing what your product can do. And only investing on an ideation phase is very difficult now, at least in the pandemic time. You need some kind of product.
Yash, can we have next question?
There's no such question yet. So, guys, can you just ask your question in chat box, or you can just forward me personally if you're having some connectivity issue.
Or of course, if there are no questions, we can close this.
Yeah, sure, sir.
Sir, there is a question. Sir, please answer the questions in the comment box.
If there is a startup similar to your startup idea but does not exist in your city, can we raise funds for that? Of course you can. See, there will be two startups in the similar area, right? Flipkart cannot say, okay, Amazon is already there, let me close the business, right? The market has to be big enough to accommodate more than one startup. And as a startup, you will always find one, even when you raise funds, you will find situations that there is another bunch of college students who have started doing the same. So you will always face competition. It's not about the idea, it's about execution, right? You need to be very good at execution. You need to be comfortable in your skin. You need to be comfortable with your product. You need to be comfortable with sales. And you can always raise funds as long as you have a market share. So it's not about just another startup in your area. It depends on how good your execution is. How do we connect after this? You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Instagram. I usually reply within 1 or 2 days. So you can reach out to me there.
I will share all the Instagram and LinkedIn handle with you guys.
Any license necessary for startup before we step into the market to build trust with customers? See, it depends on the sector that you are looking for. For example, if you're making an app like Grow or Squirrel, which helps with investments, you will need to be registered with SEBI. But there are most of the areas where you do not need any kind of registration. So it depends on the sector that you are in. Do a research, do Google, check on Google. Okay, most of the areas you don't need any kind of registration or a license to start working.
So I think we are done with questions. So can we conclude?
Sure.
Pratham, please take over.
I think good time to conclude now.
Pratham.
Pratham, you are not audible. Pratham, you are not audible.
Hello.
Yeah, now
Yes,
you
you
are.
Thank you very much for your valuable time and sharing your precious knowledge. We will always be grateful for this empathetic and outstanding session. You were entitled with the strategies of how any startup can get a beginning if the idea behind the project is unique and it connects with the people in a good manner. We also got to know about the investor fund cycle and how they affect any startup's future. Many doubts which were on the minds of our participants were also cleared with the brilliant answers. We look forward to having more of such sessions in the future. We end this session by shedding light on TBI. RCOEM TBI Foundation is a company established at RCM to give the momentum to innovation, entrepreneurship, and incubation support related activities. It is a flagship initiative of the Institute intended to build a strong ecosystem for nurturing innovation and startups in the region that will drive sustainable economic growth and generate employment opportunities, inculcate entrepreneurship, and new venture creation based on innovation technology. Our objective is to provide a platform for the speedy commercialization of technologies developed in the host institution and to provide networking between academic, industry, and financial institutions. To know more, one can check out our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter page shown on the screen. Thank you so much, Paritosh sir. Best wishes to all. I thank you all on the behalf of RCM TBI Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paritosh. Our startup founders will get in touch with you for
Sure.
more mentoring and guidance. And I will also connect with you very soon.
Sure, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Guys, if any you have any questions, just drop your questions in the TBI page or like TBI group. We will ask Paritosh sir in person. You can leave the meeting.